So very good morning from my side. My name is Jonne Kotta, and actually have two affiliations. So one is Estonian Marine Institute, University of Tartu, but I'm also a professor at TalTech University, so where I deal with a little bit of technology sides. So this is time to move on with the scientific part of the conference, and we have very many wonderful presenters here, including me. But before going to introducing all the presenters, I also wanted to thank you again, Katrin, for this lovely dinner we had yesterday, and I see it was so great that the recovery rate was very high, so we are still having a full house. That's very good news. So, as it was told yesterday, Estonia is a country of digital things, and then I was thinking that perhaps it sort of makes sense to connect digital to Antarctica research as well. So this is what my presentation is going to be, and it's more like a vision and solutions and not so much about problems. And then my talk is followed by my great colleague from the other side of the globe, from Chile. Nelson is going to give a talk about how research is done in Antarctica from Chilean perspective, so what sort of topics they have and what sort of interesting outcomes they have achieved. And then following that presentation, so we have another talk about another station in Antarctica, in Finnish station, and then it's Priit is giving a talk about the life there and interesting avenues and research and challenges what we have. And then lastly, we have a talk from Robert, and then this is completely another perspective again, so it's sorts of historical in terms of Antarctic, of course, perspective, how humans and animals and all the wildlife has evolved together, all the exploitations and good news and bad news and so on. So, with this, I would like to start with my talk. The title is a bit complicated, but I wanted to use the word digital twin because this is becoming nowadays more and more popular and everybody's talking about it. And then the idea is that if we remember what was taught us yesterday in this, when we had this panelist talking about different things, policy making and all so on, then at least I could see that there are the big disconnection between scientific community and policymakers. So it's not easy to communicate both ways because we're talking a bit different languages. We are thinking of different timescales, and something is needed to make push to have a better linkage of these parts of communities. And the second, so we have so many different challenges, crises, climate crises and energy crises and security and a few more in years to come, I'm sure. And then how to manage this crisis. And then if I'm looking from the scientific perspective, so all what we see is that we have sort of reduction of resources in relation to challenges we have to deal. So in order to make it more efficient, so we have to have solutions for that. And then we have new technologies that's perhaps not exploited as much as we should, and we have all this big data, and it's so complicated, complex, everybody's becoming so specialized in a very narrow directions, and perhaps there are only 3-4 persons in the world who can understand his or her topics. So digital twin is a solution. So its definition. So basically digital twin is a digital model of reality. It can be anything, a physical product or so on. And that serves as an effectively indistinguishable digital counterpart of it. So it's something like a replica you make of a real world. And it's mostly for practical purposes. So it can do anything like simulation, integration, testing, monitoring, and maintenance. And there is even a thing called the digital twin Antarctica. So, and that's very recent. But what they try to do, so they try to reproduce a hydrology of water movement and all these things, and they're still developing it further. But my focus is not that much of physical environment of Antarctica, but I had it like in green color. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's an ecological digital twin, and that's a big difference. Because if you think what humans are doing, so they're destroying habitats and ecosystems and all the species, valuable diversity and so on, and we are losing it at unprecedented rate. And then we have to protect not so much about salinity or water or temperature from the human impact, but more like a biota, wildlife. So we have to get beyond these physical properties and try to produce something like that resembles a digital twin of ecosystems of Antarctica. So we all know that the Antarctica is reasonably well-preserved ecosystem, even to date. But nevertheless, we have lots of important pressures. So it can come from the global things like climate change. We have acidifications and all these issues, or we have an increase in temperature that can have actually multiple consequences, not only like seawater warming, but you get all the ice melting, and that so when we get more fresh water in ocean, and that makes a visibility poorer and all these sedimentation issues and so on, and then we get a tourist and also scientist coming to the Antarctic Peninsula and few other sites. So, and that certainly has some pressures, and you can also have some indirect pressures of these visits, because we get invasive species to Antarctica. Not so many yet, fortunately. But the thing is, like at new species, they can dramatically change everything of a system, and then from how it's actually functioning. So we do not want this. And then if we don't do anything and thinking about like global reality, what we have nowadays, so we can end up like this. And this is not something we are dreaming of, and we wouldn't like to do a next documentary movie about Antarctica in future. And in order to have a solution, so we have to think how to push this trend to other directions. So instead of having a destroyed seascapes, so we would like to have a beautiful kelp forest or whatever. But we definitely have many challenges that are associated to this process, and this is because human systems are very complex. For example, if we have here different kinds of human activities that are happening in a sea, then each of the human activities are connected to multiple different pressures. So for example, if we think of shipping, like ship is going and coming, then we have a light pollution, we have a noise pollution, we have an introduction of alien species, so we possibly have a nutrient influx, so we might have oil spills, leakage, so many things can happen. And the same goes with all these different human activities. And then, of course, we have a scale issue. Something is happening at a short or local scale, something is at a global scales or regional scales, and then the time. So something is happening at the moment, something is having like a time lag, so might even pop up 5 or 10 years later, so we are very surprised, so why? And then, of course, ecosystems, super complex. And especially if we think of Antarctica and marine ecosystems, then it's a bit dramatic to have that dramatic changes in Antarctic ecosystem, because we have lots of endemic species. So endemic means that these species lives only where habitat formers, for example, and then if we lose these, so we can't replace them. So that's the end of a habitat or ecosystem. So we have to make sure that this is not happening. But in order to prevent changes, you first have to understand, because if you don't understand how a system is functioning, so you can't really protect it. Of course, you can follow the trends, but then you're a little bit like in a darkness and trying to guess what's happening next. The thing is, like natural systems are not linear. So they're very non-linear, and they normally don't have a solution. So it's a little bit like a weather. So you all heard about the butterfly that does something in Amazon, and then we get the storm here, and then I think it was a Pratchett book or somewhere, so somebody said that somebody should have killed the butterfly. but this is, we rather want to understand, because if we understand, we can probably get the causes, and then we try to remove something that is most prominent of this. So, the concept. So we have to bridge a gap between science and policy. So the science is very often, it's a very focused, very detailed, very difficult to understand for those who are not scientists. So we're talking in language that's a little bit weird. So of course we're doing nowadays is we are YouTubers and whoever, so we are doing it more in a simple way. But the thing is, like, even if we do it in a simple way, we can't make it too simple, because if you're too simple, you're simplistic and you are not talking things, and it's becoming like something that is not nature. And then we have a policy part, so we have the big treaties, interesting concepts, and large-scale ideas, what we should do, but we do not have anything in between what says us how to do it, like real actions. So what can be done that is really based on a scientific thing. It's not like a generic opinions that is coming from the science, but more like a data-driven decisions. So this is, we're very much lacking, and these are very data and analysis demanding schemes that needs to be done. Two things that is very important to stress here, and one is, I'm always telling that there is nothing more practical than theory. And this is very, very, very true, because we are all aware that we need the solutions, and we need to be useful for society. And for scientists, every day people are telling our policymakers that do something useful. And we are doing applications, and applications are great because science should be used for society, that's for sure. But if we don't have a good theory on top, on below, then we cannot build anything useful, because we can't sort of control the system. So this is one thing. And the second thing is also, we have this Seneca saying this already a few thousand years ago, that if one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. So that means we have to have a vision. We have to know where we go. Otherwise we are just doing stuff. And the vision is something that probably scientists and society should agree upon, because if we think like election cycles, then it's mostly 4 or 5 years, and that's no good. Vision should be like, we have to agree what's happening in 10, 20, 50 years perspective, and then we have to keep these promises. So some societies are better in that. I'm not sure if we do that good. But this is a digital twin model I would wanted to present to you. This is complete like a theoretic thing, but we can actually do it, and not like in a very distant future, but in even in years to come, because we have lots of elements and lots of understanding how to build these things, and some components are already there. So basically, we are trying to develop first new generation ecosystem models to reproduce the reality, what's happening, and how the different elements of ecosystems are interlinked. So basically what we do, we start with a modeling communities and processes, but this is not the theoretical modeling, but this is like very much back up with the data, real data. And then this part is super important. It's very little known, because elements in a sea are very much connected in time and space, and this part is very little understood. But as soon as we get a bit more understanding on this, then we can go to cumulative impacts, and this is about how humans are affecting natural systems. I think it's like we don't have only one human pressure, so we have many activities, and we don't know how these multiple activities are acting in synergy. So there are no good data algorithm for this. So actually we do have, but it's not yet used as widely as we should. And ultimately, based on top of it, we can start about mitigation and restoration. So this is a way forward. So I a little bit like give you some glimpses of what can be done and what's already there. So, for example, first you need the data. And of course, if we go to Antarctica, it's very challenging because you can go with, or you can live there only a few months, or you can do the research in a very few summer months, sort of, and in a very kind of restricted areas. So you have to expand it somehow, and then you have to combine in situ observations with some other technologies, and then it's a satellite observations, for example, can be one solution, but you have many more things what you can done. And basically what you do, so you are going to your location of interest, then you're doing some sort of sampling, then satellites or airplanes are flying around and collecting information about the reflectance of the seafloor in terms of light frequencies, and then you do some mumble-jumble science, and then you are eventually getting nice maps of distribution of species or groups of species or so on. And then this is something what we did jointly with Chilean scientists a few years ago. So we published a paper how you can actually map large areas of seaweeds in Antarctic Peninsula and beyond using only a few actual samples, and the prediction rates are very high, so it's very, very good. But this is because water transparency in Antarctica is way better than the water transparency here in the Baltic Sea. In the Baltic Sea, you can go diving, you open your eyes, you close your eyes, you can't see the difference because it's so dark. It's like diving in the night. But in Antarctica, you might have like 100 meter or more horizontal visibility. That's amazing. It's like being in space. So very much recommend. And then you get the communities and processes, things what you can model. And then you have simple species distribution models. So species distribution models, what they do, so you basically have different spots of samples where you collect real data. Then you have some environmental proxies, so there are expected environmental variables that might affect your species of interest. So you find some interesting relationships. If you want, you can put on top some functional elements, so not predict distributions, but more like how the community functions. Eventually you have the maps of species or some sort of function. A few years ago, again, it was not done for the Antarctic area, but it was done for Arctic. But basically, we used all available information about observations, and we predicted what would happen with the most important species of Arctic ecosystem in future when this climate change is going to be like realized, this scenario what we used. So that was a nice paper. But the problem with that sort of approaches is it's a correlative. So we do not really, we are in a black box in a way, or we are in the current scenario. Imagine if something very dramatic is happening. If we experience something that has not experienced in the past, then we are sort of lost. We can't use that sort of models. So I don't expect you to understand or follow all these formulas, but the key point here is, so we developed completely new types of modeling that integrate experimental data with the observation data. So in experiment, like a manipulated experiment, what you can do, you can actually build a scenario. So see, like if then, a little bit like this Czech presentation we had on Czech scientists making this plant thing. So you increase the temperature or you reduce a herbivory or whatever. So you do something what is not happening now. And then integrating these two things, you can predict cause-effect relationships of something that is not happening today, and then building beautiful, beautiful models. And you can go even beyond that. So you can start modeling communities, not species, because what we believe and what's already very much known is that species are not alone. So you have also lots of interactions among species and species with a abiotic environment, and there are some nice tools what you can do. And then as a consequence of this modeling, what you basically can see, so you can see how different environmental variables are affecting your species. So in which way is it increasing or decreasing, and then how different species within your communities are associated, how strong are the relationship. It's sort of hierarchical thing, Bayesian modeling, so you can very effectively describe different things and control sort of. And then you have different sort of experiments included in this design. You can also predict future with a much higher uncertainty. And this is not the only thing what you can do. You can even go more complex. You can put some hydrodynamic modeling and the water movements and all these processes into it, and then modeling carrying capacity. So to understand how much Antarctic ecosystem can resist to human pressures, for example. And then a little bit about connectivity. So connectivity, again, very interesting topic, but the problem is that they have very diverse and disconnected methods. So we have a tagging, telemetry, chemical markers, genetic approaches, modeling, each working at different temporal spatial scale. So we need to have a joint tools to put everything together and look at the sort of ecosystem-based level. So this is completely another talk, so we'll talk about like 6 hours about it. So it's very interesting and very, very important to done. And then eventually you get this cumulative impact. And this is something interesting thing, the meta-analysis concept coming from the medicine, but it's very useful also for ecology. So you can harvest published papers and collect numerical information from the effect sizes, and then ultimately build a matrix of effects to predict what is a plausible consequences of different types of human activities on different nature assets. And you even don't have to do it manually. Nowadays, we are building also a tool that harvests the data from the papers, AI technology. Not harvesting opinions, but harvesting the data. So this sort of thing is not there in ChatGPT. You have to build yourself. And then, if you're happy, you have a nice digital twin management model. So you know where you are, like this is your point. You don't want to fall down in a pit, because when you are lost, you need lots of energy to get out of there, and maybe it's not possible. So basically, you want to be in a safe operating regime, so you can control your path. So, but as you already see, so it's very complex, complicated. You can't like communicate that to the policymakers. This is not happening. So what we started to do decision support tool. Online tools, you can actually play these sorts of scenarios. And just only introduce you a couple of slides more. So we built this Bluebio sites. You can actually go to a site and observe it. And then the tool is Plan Voice or Blue. So you can select different human activities or uses in a sea space, can build a scenario, and then next, the tool calculates you the environmental impacts of this scenario on your nature values, what you have. So this is very interesting tool that is completely data-driven and using all the best available information, what you have there. So I think I'm almost, 20 seconds too much. But what I wanted to tell you, it's a knowledge and data is a key. But in order to use or exploit the existing little bits of Antarctica, what we have to unite them in a very intelligent way, and the digital twin is a solution. And don't forget about theory. Theory is a good thing. Thank you very much. So I don't know if we have time for questions, or if not, I can evacuate.